On this episode, I talk with JK, horror filmmaker, reviewer, podcaster, and more. Enjoy. Yeah, can you hear me still?
I can hear you. Yes,
awesome.
sir.
Well, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Brendan. Thank you so much for spending the time with me tonight. I appreciate it so much. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I've been busy. Just got done watching Psycho Gorman and writing a review on that. That shit was insane.
Yeah, it was. It was very cool. And in fact, it's funny you bring that up because with a film like that, I was lucky enough with Horrorhound to talk to Stephen Kostanski, and he's so much passion put into his work between his work with Astron 6 and The Void and now Psycho Gorman and even Leprechaun thrown in there. He's quite an amazing effects master, a modern day master that a lot of people don't realize unless you're really in the more of the niche side of the genre.
Right, I totally agree. His practical effect work is crazy.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So what's going on?
Nothing too much. I'm pretty excited about doing this interview with you, and I appreciate you taking your time to do it with me.
No problem. My honor to be able to do it. Thank you for accepting the invite and wanting to speak a little bit. I appreciate it. And I'm a fan of your work, so I appreciate the time and a lot of respect for what you do.
I appreciate that. And you're one of the people that got me started in doing this kind of stuff. You know, like you're a big inspiration to me because before I started doing all the horror writing and stuff, I was in pretty much a permanent time in a band. You know, I was doing all band stuff. I was in a heavy metal band for like over 15 years.
Wow.
And I really never had the time to commit to what I'm doing now, you know. Everything was for the band. So once that kind of ended, I was able to start doing this. And, you know, you're a big influence on that. And, you know, I love what you do.
Well, I'm glad that I could be influential in your career as a professional. And it definitely shows for whatever it counts for what I've done towards and has influenced you. I'm glad that you're doing well and reading your reviews and seeing your work grow. I mean, it's not something that happens overnight. I mean, it took me years and years and years, and I'm doing almost a decade now of this in different incarnations, you know, including the what I reached out to you about with Digging into Darkness. I mean, one thing you got to realize, and anyone who's a professional out there, you know, if you stay in your comfort zone the entire time and just do reviews or just do interviews or just do, you know, coverage, it's not it. You got to expand. You got to be willing to get out of your comfort zone and continue to grow. Otherwise, you'll be stagnant, and eventually things will just pass you by, which you don't need.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. The reason I got into doing the like YouTube videos and the Skype stuff was Richard Stanley, out of all people. I sent him a message one day. I was like, he's not going to respond back to me, whatever. So I sent him a message, like, hey, I would love to interview. Color Out of Space was like my favorite film when it came out and stuff. And I was like, he responds back to me. I'm like, holy shit. And I'm like, he's like, you want to do a Skype interview? I'm like, hell yeah. I was like, I'll figure this shit out, you know?
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, it was. And I'll tell you something. Richard Stanley, I had the opportunity to interview him out at Sitges and get a chance to meet him face to face. And I had seen him previous years at Fantasia, which is a film festival in Montreal. And he's such a larger than life surreal figure. He's really at the end of his evolutionary branch as a creator and just as an entity that really you feel doesn't come from this earth.
Right. I get that same feeling from him. It was like talking to like a mystic or something. It was so awesome. Exactly. I was like, holy shit, I'm talking to Richard Stanley right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was
He's
crazy.
He's a good one. And by the way, Color Out of Space, I think it was number 3 on my list for this year, and on my film festival list is like top 5 or 6 the year before 2019 before COVID. But what an incredible film with effects, adaptation of Stanley's or of Lovecraft's work, and you know, Stanley addressing the racism issue that Lovecraft was surrounded by, and you know, Nick Cage being Nick Cage. There's so much to love about that film.
It was so good. I mean, he nailed it. Like, if anybody's doing any more like Lovecraft movies, I hope it's him. And he says he does have plans to like do, I think, a trilogy of movies, I believe. So,
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, when you look at the aspect of companies like Legion M and Spectrovision, who's firmly behind him, I mean, it's a great time if you have a very eclectic vision to go out there and make it a point to be seen at Beyond Fest and get to know Elijah Wood and Josh Weller and those at Spectrovision and those at Legion M, because they're looking for visions that are outside the box, that don't, you know, Brendan, go the normal tropes, and how everyone has that cookie cutter formula, or is
Mhm.
so, you know, respective and wants to replicate the masters of the 1980s. I mean, they are looking for some stuff. And in the short film I just finished for my first semester back in the film program at Montclair State,
Uh-huh.
Within the Frame, that one is very much influenced by, you know, watching the color out of space and Mandy and what Spectravision's doing, and how I handled the final 30 seconds and stuff, because you really want to be able to go out there and do it. And not everyone's going to love it, but you know, when you find people who back you on it,
Mhm.
like Spectravision is done with Richard Stanley and the Lovecraft adaptations, it's really amazing to see such kinship when it comes to that.
Yeah, I love anything with Spectravision on the label. I'm gonna love and watch. I haven't been disappointed yet. I mean,
Yes.
Mandy's probably my favorite film of probably all time right now. It's gonna be hard to really knock that off the top for me. I mean, Mandy just blew me away. The very first viewing of that movie, I was like, "Holy shit, what is this, man?" You know. And it
It's
can't be beat. It kind of ruined most movies for me, unless it's another Spectravision film like Color of Space has that same feeling to it, like the crazy
right.
ass colors and stuff, and the awesome soundtrack and just that view that they have. You know.
Yeah, you're right about that. And it's so interesting that the freedom that they're allowed to have creatively to work on what they want to work on, and how you're able to bring so many elements together, including, you know, it's kind of underrated or kind of lost against the visual palette, but the sound and score, absolutely amazing what Panos and Richard Stanley are able to do
Hmm.
in those two films through Spectravision, because they completely understand. Even if you look at Elijah Wood with some of the characters he's embodied, when it comes to the remake of Maniac, which is an
Oh yeah.
exceptionally respectful remake and retelling of that classic grime and cult film, as
Hmm.
well as the aspect of Come to Daddy, Aunt Timpson's debut feature, which hit the festival circuit and was huge. I can't tell you how many times I saw it at so many festivals. And it, you know, Elijah Wood has that unique perspective, and he's joined by such amazing people and collaborators with Spectravision. It really is incredible.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I can't wait to see what the next film they come up with. I'm hoping they do like a werewolf movie. I've been saying this for a while now, but we need a really awesome werewolf movie to come out, and I think they could do one really, some good justice and stuff, you know.
Well, maybe, but they're very drawn to characters, and that's something
Hmm.
that, with the visual perspective that you see with, again, Color Out of Space, Mandy, among others, people tend to forget about the characters that are a part of this. They're so focused on the surreal aspect. You know, you feel like you're on drugs watching these films in certain
Right.
instances when you're doing this, and you forget about the struggles and the human condition, and how, you know, with Color Out of Space, how the family it fractures apart, and the structure of it. And with Mandy, you know, the love that's between the two lead characters and what he goes through with that struggle, and even the antagonists,
Hmm.
especially for Mandy. I mean, you're looking at, you know, a character that is somewhat of a cult leader, and how those people surround him. I mean, there is so much to love on every single level with what they're doing with them. And a werewolf film would be amazing. A werewolf
Yeah.
film would be incredible coming at them. But, you know, I want to see more original content from them,
Yeah.
or more of an original spin on it, and that's more important to me than seeing something primarily focused on a particular subgenre of horror.
Right. I mean, look at Arch Enemy too. That's another good example of some like surreal
Exactly.
awesomeness.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, you
Arch Enemy.
interviewed Adam, right?
Yeah, I got to talk to him
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago.
He's a
That was
cool
freaking
cat,
awesome.
man.
Yeah, Adam's awesome.
Yeah, he's a cool cat. Daniel Isn't Real was one of my favorite films. I think it was my favorite film from 2 years ago on the festival circuit,
Same.
and it's still one of my favorite films out there because of the characters, because of what he's able to do with those, you know, dealing with the invisible friend horror
Hmm.
trope. And I had a great time at South by Southwest when that was released a couple of years. God, I can't believe it's a couple of years ago now.
Hmm.
You know, I had a great time interviewing Adam, you know, fresh off the PR. And he's such an amazing guy, and the film's such an amazing testament to what he was able to do in that adaptation of what he did with that book. I mean, just incredible.
Yeah, he's got a great vision, and I see nothing but cool stuff coming from him in the future too. I can't wait to see what the next project's going to be for him. You know.
Well, yeah, and you know what's one thing about him? I mean, he did Some Kind of Hate, which got a lot of praise on the festival circuit. And
Hmm.
you know, for those filmmakers out there, you know, I've been following the festival circuit for a good 5 years heavy, doing, you know, 20 plus film festivals on average a year, and that's going to
Wow.
change now after COVID, and my life and everything now going forward. But one thing I can tell you about it is that, films that do well in the festival circuit don't always do well after they're done on distro. And Color Out of Space is a great example of that. It's a great festival film you see in the theater, but who knows where it's going to actually go? I mean, the important thing is it makes its money back. That's the important thing with the producers, that they make the money back. And that's something that's always in the mind, even for Richard Stanley. What do the producers think? How do they feel? What are their notes? Stuff like that. That's stuff he's talked about before. But when you see it, also simplicity. If you want to write something simple, because we are in the age of horror that is not overblown with effects, not really, not Mandy and Color Out of Space are kind of the exceptions to the rule when it comes to it. You want something that's more character driven, character based for a feature. Short films are different because, as someone just recently said, a creative exercise. They really are a creative exercise. And if you're able to put a story into 5 to 10 minutes, that's fantastic. You can do all the visual or practical effects you want to be able to do. But features, simplicity in the characters, simple locations, limited locations, and really kind of building that dread. So the reveal is later on with the monster, not completely engulfing you with the monster. And that's something that people tend to forget when it comes to it. But, you see things like Mandy and Color of Space, and you tend to forget that. And that's something, that Adam really did well with Daniel Isn't There, or Daniel Isn't Real, excuse me, because of the fact that he was able to really have some captivating characters and mental illness and very simple and beautiful locations. And then he hits you with more of the effects as it goes on. Once he establishes those characters, which during the festival run, seeing in different cities was priceless, because it really is a great job of someone who went from some kind of hate, which so much buzz and kind of disappeared, and he kind of disappeared, to now with Arch Enemy and Daniel and more to come from him down the line.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, the whole surreal thing really appeals to me, because I like to be taken away when I'm watching a movie.
Right.
That's so much shit now I see. It's like, man, it's really cookie cutter and stuff like that. Like, it's just hard to compete with these Spectre-Vision films. It really is. Like, I think it shows everybody else needs to kind of up their game,
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And, you can do that. But again, it's a collaboration in finding the right people and getting in front of the right set of eyes. Because if you don't, you could go ahead and create as much as you want, but you got to be able to move forward with it and get it to the right place. Otherwise, you're going to be spinning your wheels for a long time. That's why filmmaking is the most challenging and the most frustrating when it comes to it, because there's so many filmmakers out there who are just like you, who want to create the next great thing and be that 1%. And guess what? It generally doesn't happen. So you've got to find an original spin or something that's going to captivate and connect with people.
Right. What got you on your venture into the horror world? What got your start doing all this?
Yeah, it's fascinating, Brendan. I've been a fan forever. One of my first films I can ever remember is Faces of Death, seeing it when I was a little kid. And I saw it because back when I was a kid, I'm 44 now, back when I was a kid, we used to have friends over, and the neighborhoods were much different than they are now. The world was a much different place than it is now. And you could bring over really inappropriate stuff. And Faces of Death was a VHS tape we brought over and we watched with our friends, and it always stuck with me. But I grew up with Friday the 13th and Evil Dead and Halloween and The Eye, or not The Eye, The Gate. I'm thinking of The Eye in the Middle of the Hand, The Gate, and films like that. And I always was a fan, but it wasn't until I went through a really bad breakup that I really fell back into the niche of horror. And at the time, a lot of video stores were starting to close up, and I really immersed myself in a lot of foreign horror, French New Wave, a lot of Asian horror, Korean J-horror, back when it was, very prevalent, the early 2000s. And I was able to really immerse myself, and I became more and more involved with it and just continued to watch it through the mid 90s. And then for me, and this is something people find very, very surprising, is for a decade, I've been in radio for 20 some odd years. And my first decade primarily was swing, big band, jazz, jump blues, and rockabilly. And I did a lot of music radio, not a lot of talk radio. And after the audience, Brandon, kind of dried up, it became a point where I went ahead and either I was going to leave radio or I was going to reinvent what I was doing. And I reinvented it by doing horror talk radio. The Ghost, who was my partner at the time and a good portion for many years, before we kind of went our separate ways, she really pushed me towards doing that. And we developed the idea together. And then I took it further with that by introducing interviews and being more than just a podcast where people talk to each other like we are. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to do more. Because I really did not have the experience. So what I wanted to do was be the host and have the people who were doing, as I like to say, the meat work in the genre, whether it's film, writing, artistic, whatever it might be, and later on film festivals and more like that. I wanted them to be the guests and to talk about it because they were the authorities on it. And I was more of the host. I never thought of myself as much of a fan on the radio. I wanted to learn. Fans generally don't want to learn. Fans want to just be immersed and live vicariously through. If they pick up things, that's great, but they don't tend to do that. So I wanted to be more of a host and more of it to absorb what they were doing. And 1,800 interviews later, 1,800 conversations later, in the 9+ years, I really got involved with it and started back in 2012. And it started off once a month, mixed in with the music radio, and then slowly just took over. And every week I was doing it, at first just for a couple hours, but it ended up at one point 5 hours every week I was doing it live. And it was, you damn right about that. And it takes a lot of time. It's a 7-day-a-week job in promotion and editing and producing and hosting and interviewing and researching. And, and I was reading books and I was watching films. I mean, I knew sometimes with the authors, I knew the books better than they did, when it came to it. But it just increased. And for 6.5 years, Brandon, it was live 4 to 5 hours a week. And I was averaging 4 to 7 guests every single program where I was talking to them. And after a while, it teetered out. And again, I came to that crossroads where I decided that, I was going to go more to a podcast form. But that's how I really got into it. And if it wasn't people like Denise Gossett, who runs Shriek Fest, who was one of the first guests, and Jack Ketchum, God rest his soul, who was my first, one of my first real big guests that was on there, I don't know if I would have done it because it takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication to do it. And, it's also a little insanity. So that's how I got into it and, maintained it. But it was something that I did as a way to stay in radio and get to be around people. And it also opened up doors for Horrorhound and film festivals and traveling and projects and filmmaking. So it had a lot of things connected to it. And it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's definitely a lot of work right there. I mean, especially compared to what I'm doing right now. I still work my regular job and stuff, and then pretty much
working a regular job. Keep in mind, Brandon, this was not a full-time job.
Wow.
Folks, there is very little money in what you're doing if that's what you're doing. It was more of a hobby that turned into somewhat of a career, and it's made a little money along the way. And it's been a wonderful experience, and it's been a hell of a ride with it. But I was working a full-time job. I work with special needs. So right now I own my own business, but before I was working in a school district as a paraprofessional and, clients on the side, and I was doing that. And, I had help with it, but primarily it was me that went ahead and did it. And then I would morph into traveling and stuff like that. So it was a great balancing act that, was wonderful for all those years. But Brandon, you don't doubt yourself because I started off just like you. Once a month I was doing it and it evolved into more. It depends on what you want to do, how much you want to do it, and what you want to put into it. That's always the big things for me as I look back on it.
Yeah, I was the same with being in a band. It's how much you put in, what you want to sacrifice to get where you want to go. So,
dude, I booked. I've gotten more back into swing music since the pandemic, and I'm working on a documentary project about the swing music of the mid 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, it's like a ghost story. That's a story for another time. I booked a band in the mid to late 2000s, the Gas House Gorillas, and I spent 3 years booking the band, being on the road, photography, roadie, booker, manager, everything else. The only thing I didn't do was sing and play an instrument. That was about it. But I feel you, dude, because you go out there, and even if you're a polished band, there's so much work to getting everything done because everything is elevated and everything is always on the line. And there's always things that can go wrong, but there's so many things that can go right.
Exactly. And there's so much more work than actually doing your regular job, which is crazy.
Exactly.
Like, oh, you're in a band, that's all fun. Like, no, if I'm not playing, I'm driving. If I'm not driving, I'm selling merch. If I'm not selling
Right.
merch, I'm promoting. Like, if this repeats, you don't get no sleep. It's like,
yeah, you're right. And you know what? We traveled with the Gas House Girls. We traveled from Coney Island all the way out to Las Vegas. That's what I was able to do with them in my 3 years or so with them, being a part of it. But it was an amazing time, and 9-to-5 jobs. I'm not saying that 9-to-5 jobs are easy, not by any stretch of the imagination, because there's a lot of work. But to own your own business and to do freelance stuff, and really have no net, and with a band, you really have no net to go by, because you're selling the merch to pay for the gas in the hotel and maybe make a little scratch for you to pay the bills and continue doing this. It's a lot of work that goes into it, and it's a lot of fun because I had a lot of whiskey and a lot of good times.
That's awesome. And that's something I didn't even know about, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is very cool. And that's why I'm working on the doc now, Brandon, because that time and I was doing the radio show during the swing, the retro swing movement, but between the radio and the band, I mean, that time was one of the most amazing times. And it was way before I came so ingrained in horror, and it's something that I have as much passion for. And surprisingly, it's as niche as horror is, because it's a certain crowd and, as I put it, dysfunctional family that comes together to support it and love it.
Right. I totally agree on that. Same in the metal world. It's more a big, giant, dysfunctional family. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And what's even funnier about it? I worked in Sam Goody's for a good 3 years when I was much, much younger. And the guy who introduced me to the swing music was a mid-40s-year-old metalhead who was the store manager for Sam Goody's. And man, he had bleached hair, and it was like a bobby cut. He had piercings and tattoos, and he loved. And this was the time when the late 90s, when things were opening up with the MTV generation, and some of the metal acts were really starting to move forward. Like, you saw more System of a Down, Cold. Korn was moving into more of the mainstream thing, and Metallica was always there, but I mean, they were becoming even more. And it was crazy to think about that someone who looked like he had nothing to do with the swing movement would say, you know what, Jay, this is what you were going to listen to this week in featuring, and the rest is history on that front.
No, I'm the same way. I love my heavy metal and stuff though, but a big passion of mine is also like 80s kind of goth new wave type stuff. Nice. I love that shit. And I love the new wave that's coming out now, like I guess called like dark wave or whatever, like Glad Majesty, bands like that. I'm all into that shit.
Yeah. And you know what? You don't realize it until later on how impactful and how amazing they are, because a lot of times it's such a small percentage that make it through to mainstream and for people to hear. But unless you're cued into the underground, that's a great thing with horror. Unless you go to film festivals or conventions, there's a lot of times that there's a lot of films that fall through the cracks. Or being a journalist, there's a lot of times films fall through the cracks. Same thing with music. It falls through the cracks. So to be able to be in that initial wave and see and hear this art is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's a goal of mine, being that I don't have to save all my time up to go tour or whatever. Now I want to start going to like movie festivals and stuff. Now that's something I've never been able to do, and I want to really do that after all this plague is over. Hopefully, that's something I want to do in the future. That's a goal of mine.
Yeah, it's a great goal to do it, because the festivals for me, and 4 years ago, somewhere around there, Brandon, I was ready to quit horror. I was just done. I was done. And if it wasn't for film festivals and moving in to being more immersed in that, and I've traveled around the world. The only place I haven't really been was Australia and Asia so far. But I've traveled to Europe and Latin America, North America, Canada. I mean, United States and Canada. But I've had the honor of being a judge, a programmer, now a filmmaker who's submitting in his film, a fan, a viewer, everything in between. And, if it wasn't for these festivals, and it's a lot of times it's forgotten by many people because they just want to reflect the masters and pay homage. That's great. I have nothing but respect for the masters of horror. But there's so many filmmakers out there now who deserve the respect and recognition as well. And that's been a cornerstone of Horror Happens Radio, of my work with Horrorhound, Dread Central, and everywhere's in between, is focusing more on the up-and-coming crop of filmmakers over the last decade and what they're doing. You talking to Adam, I have so much respect for you to do that, because there's so many people who would pass that up because he doesn't do this or he doesn't do that. Well, I got news for you. In a decade, he might be the next guy who's put out 2 or 3 more horror hits. And then what are you going to say? But you're at the forefront of it, just like I am, to make sure you do it. And to go to film festivals is what you really need to do. And it's so funny you mentioned the plague, because Horrorhound issue 82, which is now is going to be one of those items that people are going to collect, because it came out during the pandemic, and it got lost in the pandemic because everything shut down. So a lot of the issues never made it to shelves. And I had in there, traveling so much, I had a personal film festival guide that covered in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. It had 30 of my festivals that I've been to, a personal guide, not one. And I love what Movie Maker did. I love what Dread Central did. But it was a personal one where I talked about experiences and the places to eat and airports and what movies I've been and what screenings I love. And it was something that was lost. But if you get a hold of it, there are so many great festivals in there. But even not just mine, Brandon, look at Dread Central, look at Movie Maker Magazine, and see the festivals they recommend, because there are so many out there, virtual and hopefully soon on site, that you can go ahead and spend next to nothing and take a road trip, and within the same weekend probably do 2 or 3 festivals in a certain block of the country that you're in. So go, folks, support these festivals, because if you don't, they ain't going to be around for much longer.
Exactly, especially in the time we're living now, like all this crazy shit. So
yep, that's right. You're exactly right.
What got you in with Horrorhound magazine? How'd you get your start with them and writing and all that stuff for them?
It goes back to film festivals, but even before that, it's so funny because Horrorhound is my Fangoria. A lot of people say, Horrorhound is my Fango. Horrorhound was the magazine that I love, and issue 37, way back when, I was lucky enough to shoot a parody of the stranger scene where they're sitting in the chairs and the strangers are confronting them. And Aaron Crowell, who is one of the managing editor of the magazine, I think I said his name wrong. I've never gotten his name right in all the years I've known him. He gave me an opportunity after I went to a Horrorhound weekend, and I met Aaron Christensen, Dr. AC, who's a incredibly brilliant man in general, but incredibly brilliant horror fan. And he wrote for Horrorhound for years. And he happened to see me taking pictures at one of the panels. I think it was the one with Pam Grier that particular year. And he went ahead and he said, it's about time they got a professional photographer to shoot pictures. And I said, I ain't no professional photographer, but I got a camera and I'm enjoying it. And he and I became friends, and it opened the door to Horrorhound. And if you look in issue 87 on the subscription page, at the back of the magazine, you'll see my parody picture of the strangers that's tied in and themed for Horrorhound, which is so brilliant, because we got to create masks, and we got to replicate one of my all-time favorite films, one of the all-time most scariest films that you're ever going to see with the strangers. Yeah. And from there, after that, I continued to go to the festivals, and I did the radio program. And one thing I recommend, Brandon, for anyone who's willing to listen, is have film festival directors and convention directors on your program. Because if you do that, you open up a door that very few can get into, because you get to know the people who are running it. And that is so crucial. And at one time, I think it was 2017, I did 70 plus film festival programmers and directors. And it opened up the doors for me to be able to get press credentials, to be able to get access to films I couldn't have, to build personal and professional connections. And while I was doing Horror Happens Radio, I brought on Aaron, and I brought on both Aarons. I brought on Jason Crenton, who's another writer, and he does the Horrorhound podcast. I brought on Nathan, who is a good friend, and he's the head of the convention and the editor of the magazine. I got to know Jeremy Sheldon, who's a big player in it, and we were able to build friendships. And for them, I started doing reviews, issue 67, I think it was, somewhere around there. And I was given work to do reviews, and if I wanted to do some work on their website when they did reviews and all that, until I was at Fantastic Fest, probably my second favorite festival in the entire world, next to Macabro in Mexico City. Right. And I was covering Phantasm Ravager. Did I say that right? Ravager? Yeah, Ravager.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, Ravager. Yeah.
So I was covering that, and Nathan reached out to me via Facebook Messenger, and he said to me, because I had not done any interviews for them yet. I was just still doing reviews, and he goes, I see you're at Fantastic Fest. Is there any chance you can get coverage of the new Phantasm film? And I said, son of a bitch. And right before he did it, I talked with David Hartman, the director of the movie. And I was going to do it for my radio program, but I ended up saying, I got an interview with David, the director. He goes, that's who I wanted to feature in the magazine. I said, okay, sounds good. And from there, I did an interview or two every issue, and I continued to do reviews when they needed them. And now, Brandon, years later, building that relationship, quality work, putting myself out there at festivals, some that Horrorhound sent me to, some that I didn't, and building that network. I'm the staff writer now, and I handle all independent and festival coverage for Horrorhound magazine with reviews, interviews, and the 10 random questions and other things in between. And I got a chance to do the festival guide, which was my first feature this past year, and it's been the blast. But that's how I got into it, by dumb luck, hard work, and really getting to know people. When I didn't have to do it, I went out of my way to do it.
Well, it's really awesome and really encouraging too, especially again for someone like me. I've only been doing this officially for like maybe a year and a few months now. I think I've had the website and everything like that, and that's just really encouraging. That's makes me want to keep on going. It's really awesome.
Yeah, it is. And one thing, Brandon, I will say for you when it comes to this is, it's great to do reviews online, and it's great to do the work that you're doing. But one thing I've learned, and I think Dread Central, Horror News Network, HorrorNetwork.net, and a lot of things, Nightmares, Conjurings, a whole bunch in between. But you can't do it for free forever. And when you put your work out there and you're doing it for years, I got very lucky that I'm able to do it for Horrorhound. And Horrorhound, again, for me, is like my grail, is what I wanted to do and write for. But there's also involved with a little bit of pay. And that's what you should target. That's what everyone should target, is the fact that in the beginning, you pay your dues. But as you move forward, you look for the places that are going to go ahead and treat you right. And they're going to go ahead. And whether you may not necessarily be paid, but they're going to find ways to make it worth the while to do it. And that's one of the things that with Horrorhound, I'm so thankful, and Nathan and Jeremy and everyone involved. And, one of the things they do is all the hard work there. It's a great learning experience, but also it's worth the time to be able to do it, because I've worked towards that and I've earned that. And that's one thing I would say to people that's kind of forgotten, because everyone wants to jump in and do reviews and interviews. Oh, I'll get my name out there, I'll get recognized. But the truth of the matter is that it's a sea of people doing it, and you really have to make yourself stand out to do it, especially now with COVID and everyone doing podcasts. Everyone's doing podcasts now. It's so true. I look back at the years I did the radio show live for 4 or 5 hours, and I don't know anyone who's really done that, or it's such a small percentage, but it opened up doors because I put the time in, and it led to better things. But you got to work and put in the dues, but you got to look forward that it's going to be more as you go forward, and you're going to be able to stand out.
Right. No, that's definitely true. And one thing I'm trying to implement now is just like killing social media right now, just staying relevant. No matter if it's like I'm posting an article about something else or whatever, as long as I can stay relevant with that, keep it fresh, Yeah. I think it helps, especially with Twitter. I'm really good with Twitter because I did all the social stuff for the band when we were around and stuff like that. So I know navigate around all that stuff. But especially with Twitter, I can like at somebody like a director I like let's say Panos or somebody like that, whoever's on there, and they get right back at me, like, being in come in contact with these people I look up to is really awesome, and try to, throw my stuff around that way as well,
Yeah, you're right about that. And that's the beauty of social media, that you're able to get to a variety of different creative people within the deep, dark corners of horror, but it becomes tougher as they become more famous,
Oh, yeah.
It becomes harder to do it, and becomes harder to get in contact on social media. And you really have to. One thing I highly recommend for folks out there, and it's been a godsend on certain times, is IMDb Pro.
I've been looking at that.
It's so worth it. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not cheap to do for the year. But if you're really ingrained in what you're doing, you want to be able to raise your game and get to people who you might not, and open up different doors. it's definitely worth the money to do it. And also the simple fact that when you do it, get to know the people around you, because again, festival programmers are in contact. And I know, because I am one for multiple festivals now. I've worked up to that. In the last couple of years, it's really been revolutionary. Just like becoming, I consider myself a filmmaker finally, because I actually made something that's not 30 seconds long and, as bad as you're going to get. It's fun, but it's not anything that I would consider being as more of a filmmaker who's what I'm doing now. But get to know the festival programmers, because they are around these people all the time. And if you get in good with them and you get to know them, and you build that rapport and you have conversations and you talk with them about their film festivals, which they work so hard on, all of a sudden you're saying, well, I see that so-and-so is going to be at your festival. Is there any chance I can get in contact with the press agent? Is there any chance that you might be able to introduce me? Or is there a chance I can get into the screening of their film so I can listen to their Q&A and talk to them? Because a lot of times, especially, Brandon, in the initial stages, there are a lot of people, these filmmakers, that are just want to get their film out there, and they're trying so hard to do it. And it just takes one good interview or a handful of eyes to get in front of it. And you know what? You could be off to the races. You don't know, but it puts you in the right direction. I know, because I've been there and I've done it.
That's really good tips there, and I'm definitely going to take advantage of that. I've looked into the IMBD Pro thing before, but haven't really ventured into it any more than that,
Right.
So I've been trying to get in contact with some other, like, old school badasses from, like, the 80s and stuff, and then you have to go through their, like, agent and all that stuff, or you get the wrong email or something, and it's a bit of a pain.
Yeah, it is. But that's where you go ahead. And I'll give you a great example. And folks, those who are listening to this, everything I'm saying is not without me going through this experience. This is stuff that I've dealt with for almost a decade. And there's people who have dealt with it even longer than me, who probably have different tips and different experiences and different ways of doing it. So that, listen to everyone and learn, because the people like me who have done it, this is your chance to get to know these things firsthand. But the Masters of Horror, if I told you, Brandon, that on the same radio program, it was Mick Garris, Joe Dante, Tom Holland, Lucky McKee, John McNaughton, and a couple others. I mean, is that like, the 1980s right there?
Yeah, it's the best of the best, too, yes.
It's the best of the best. And why? Because it surrounded the radio program on the anniversary of the Masters of Horror, and they were so passionate about it. And they wanted to come on, and we talked for a good 45 minutes to an hour to each of them. And
That's
why?
crazy.
Because it took one person. I got to know Tom Holland for writing it for Tom Holland's Terror Time when that was really prevalent. I got to know Mick Garris because I had him on previously. I got to know Larry Pheasant. That's another one. I got to know him because I covered films by him and his son. I got to Joe Dante because of Mick Garris. It takes one person to open up those doors, and you've got to be willing to ask, not push, but be willing to ask and show that your work is worth their time to be able to do it. But once you do it and you get to know them on more of a professional, maybe even personal level, those doors may open up, and you've got to work with it and run with it and know when to say when and when not to say when, because no one likes a stalker fan whatsoever.
Oh, no.
So,
yeah, definitely don't want to be that.
yeah, it's and a lot of people forget that line of personal and professional. That's why there's only a handful of people in my entire time that have actually, what's the term, fanboyed, as I like to say, bucket list. And two of them happened before. One was Mary Herron who American Psycho, and Takashi Miike. When I had a chance, and I was as respectful as I could have been, but inside I was exploding with how excited I was to be across the table and talking to them and meeting them, people I idolize. But you got to remember, you got to be professional. If you're not professional and show why you're worth talking to, they're just going to walk by you or pacify you, because that's what happens most times.
Right. That's also really good advice, and I've seen it before, like not really at festivals, but seeing people's posts sometimes about this super fanboy. And I was like, that's kind of weird, man. Calm it down a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, it's great to be a fan. I mean, we're all fans at heart, but you've got to know the line between fandom and being a professional and showing it. And one of the great things with the festivals is being able to do that, because Fantasia a few years ago, when Nightmare Cinema came out for Mick Garris, the anthology, I had a chance to meet Joe Dante in person and and Mick Garris and Ryu Kimura. I mean, those directors right there were part of it. It wouldn't
Right.
have happened if I didn't show that there was a reason why I should be there. And who's ever writing reviews, whoever's doing interviews, put everything you have into your work, but make sure that you know that it's quality and professional. It's so important.
Right, and that's something I'm trying to get better with too. Because I mean,
Yeah,
I've actually increased my word count, stuff like that. Just trying to put
good.
more me into it and stuff. Like just make it more me. That's what I'm trying
Yeah,
to really
make it more
focus
you,
on.
dude. Yeah,
Yeah,
make it more you, and make sure, like you had Adam on, cover the independents as well as the more throwback films and more of the mainstream, because those independents can lead to things that you'd be surprised about.
Oh yeah, on my written side of like my website and everything, I got a lot of badass independent horror filmmakers like
Good.
Billy Pond, who did Circus of the Dead. He's a good friend of
Yeah, I
mine.
love
James
Billy.
Balsamo. I mean, all those guys are
Yeah.
badasses.
Yeah, James Balsamo was one of my first interviews I ever had, and I did a panel, Brandon, on Horror Happens Radio way back when, in the early days, where it was Adam Albrandt, Mike Mahoney, Tom Ryan, Manny Serrano, Liam and Evan Macrogiannis, Ryan Scott Weber, and James Balsamo. They were all in one panel, and believe me, I was so green and I
Mhm.
so didn't know anything. And if I listen to it now, it hurts my ears. But it was a great experience because it gave me credibility in showing my passion, showing I wanted to do it. And James has been always a great supporter, and he's a great person, and he's a crazy filmmaker and
Oh,
all
yeah.
that. And, tastes will come and go. As you get more ingrained with it, you'll find what your niche is and what you want to cover. And James's work is something I haven't covered in a while because it hasn't really gone into the circles of stuff I've been covering. But a ton of people do. And getting in there with him, he's around so many people.
Mhm.
It's insane that he works with and collaborates with. It's incredible. And he's one of the nicest people that I know.
Yeah, I've known James forever now. I met him by with the band stuff. We had a couple of songs in a few of his movies and stuff, and
Nice,
we just
dude.
went from there. Yeah, yeah. I was like so impressed. I was like, holy shit, there's our band playing where this dude's getting his head shot cut off. I'm like, this is fucking awesome.
That's
So
awesome,
that's how I
dude.
met James. I'm like, and he's been great since then. I've known him like I said 4 or 5 years now maybe, and I've done a
He's
bunch
so
of reviews
cool.
for him too. Like he has sent me some screeners and stuff, and I throw out a review and everything. I love what he does. He's got a lot of passion.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. And he's a smart businessman. He knows how to turn over and sell his movies and be successful with it, which is so important. He is a really kind of, that next generation of Roger Corman, of Lloyd Kaufman. He really
Oh,
knows how to do it from the business side and put out stuff that's effective and financially sensible and just fun.
yeah, definitely fun. You watch one of his movies, you can be feeling better after it's done. You don't have to like worry about got to follow this, follow that. No, just enjoy yourself. It's going to be crazy as shit, and
Exactly.
James, yeah,
Yeah, very much so. And he's been smart enough. I mean, there's a lot of people who, when they want to do a film like that, it's a trauma kind of film. And
right.
I'm not the biggest fan of trauma. I'm really not. I have a lot of respect for trauma. I'm just not a big fan of trauma films and that kind of subgenre. But
Mhm.
James has been able to parlay it under the Acid Bath banner for years, and he's been able to create his own type of trauma-esque studio. And
Yeah,
I mean, he's such a great businessman. His brother was so ingrained with him for years. His brother's a great guy, and he's just an amazing guy, and he does incredible work. And he's someone that people should look at as a model for filmmaking. He may not want to create the films he does, but definitely for a filmmaking model.
exactly. Yeah, totally agree with that. Tell me a little bit about the Digging into Darkness film discussion board that you're running.
Well, it's so fascinating because for me, I've never been shy about wanting to talk to people. I've been debating and talking, arguing my entire life pretty much. And
Uh,
it's so funny because I've been lucky enough to do all kinds of panels. I was for years I worked with Horrorhound hosting panels, everything from Saw to Sons of Anarchy to The Strangers and everything in between. And
mhm.
to be able to get in front of people is really a talent. And it's something that, a lot of people say, well, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. It's easy. For me, the first 10 seconds is the most nerve-wracking. For most people, it's the entire thing. Being
Mhm.
able to think on your feet, ask questions, being able to build a rapport with people, whether it's good or in some cases not good.
Right.
But it's something that's really needed. And so, between that and the film festivals back in late 2019, Montclair Film, and it's montclairfilm.org is the website. You can check out. here in Montclair, New Jersey. They've been around forever. They're one of the forces to join the Montclair Film Festival, which is a great film festival every single year here in Jersey. And I had wanted in 2019 with Montclair Film to go ahead and set up a series in-house at Montclair Film, which is a small little viewing room. It's maybe got 40 or 50 seats in it, to get the film festival films that were coming through the area and host the guests, whether it was virtual or in-house, and kind of do a festival or kind of do a screening of these festival films, because I was so ingrained in the film festivals. Well, COVID hit, and COVID kind of extinguished that. And I wasn't sure if that was going to get back to it, because, you know, a lot of people, including film festivals, went virtual. And that was great for them because it still offered stuff for fans out there, even if it wasn't the in-person experience. And, you know, Digging in the Darkness kind of came when Jill, who is one of the primary focuses at Montclair Film, and Sue and Tom, who runs it, they reached out to me and they said, listen, we're trying to expand the educational programming. And I remember that, you know, you've been talking with Tom about doing this discussion series, and he goes, are you still interested in doing it? And I was like, absolutely. And, you know, and sometimes, you know, you do things for money. Sometimes you just do it for passion. And for me, I was lucky to find the best of both worlds, because this is something that, because my time is so valuable, I was able to invest my time a little more thoroughly in it. And I said to him, okay, so let's structure it this way. And they gave me the dates and they gave me everything with it. And it ended up that for 5 Sundays, starting February 21st, for 1 hour every Sunday, I'm going to feature films that are on Netflix. And what we did was, you know, as part of Digging into the Darkness, which is a horror film discussion series focused on Netflix horror, people who register and pay a small fee for the 5 weeks of discussion and Q&A and educational around these horror films are going to be able to come face to face, Brandon, or screen to screen, I should say, because it'll be over Zoom, with 5 films and some of the creative talent behind them. And the films include the aspect of 1BR, Dark Light, Stephen King's 1922, The Black Coat's Daughter, and Freaks.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, they're all incredible films. And the great thing about this, and again, folks, if you're listening to me, go to film festivals, build that circle around you of PR people, festival directors, filmmakers, and people who are really ingrained in the genre. Because all 5 of them I've spoken with, Brandon, either on Horror Happens Radio, covered them for websites, or they've been written in the pages with reviews or interviews in Horrorhound. So I was able to get incredible people, and I'll go down each film. For Dark Light, and you can go on to montclairfilm.org. I believe they have the schedule up of the 5 weeks who's going to be part of it, but I'll just go general. For Dark Light, I was able to get filmmaker Padre Reynolds, who is, since 2011, Rites of Spring, Open 24 Hours, which is out right now, and several films in between. He is such a passionate horror filmmaker and fan. He is someone who will fly cross-country around the world just to make his festival presentation, his Q&A, his screening. He is one of the most tireless people and amazing people I've ever met in my life, both personally and professionally. And he would give the shirt off his back just to have a chance to go ahead and talk with people about it. And he is going to be part of the series, Talking Darklight. David Marmer, who I had a chance with him, the producers, some cast and some crew at Fantasia. And you can see the interview actually on the 1BR Blu-ray and DVD release. I had a chance to do a 45-minute interview with 10 or 11, I forget the number now, from 1BR. So after that, David and I and Alok Mishru, who's the producer, became friends. We actually became friends. And I had them, when I co-moderated the class for my first semester back in the film program at Montclair State University, I had them come in and talk 1BR to our film forum class. Well, I thought, if I'm going to do this for Digging into the Darkness, the discussion series Montclair Film, I want David to come back this time on his own to talk 1BR. So he's going to be joining the series, talking 1BR, his first feature film, and a film that was tops in Netflix. It was #1 for several days when it was released on Netflix. You know how hard it is to do that?
Oh, yeah, I know.
Incredibly hard to do that. But that's a testament to the buzz and the quality and the festival festival run that the film had. So he's going to be joining it. I'm also going to have the co-creators of Freaks, which is the great hybrid of superhero and horror and sci-fi. And if for those who have not seen the film, I don't want to give too much of it away because it's best not to know, just like when VR, not to know what you're going in and seeing. You're surprised by it because it's not anything that you will expect. And people like Emile Hirsch, the little girl who portrays Emile's daughter, Bruce Dern, they all give incredible performances in this film, and it really rides that idea of superpowers and you know what happens when it's not for the betterment of the world, but it's for own personal gain. So Adam Stein and Zach Wapowski, I believe is his last name, is going to be joining me for this. Also, let's see, we've talked about 1BR, we've talked about Darklight, we've talked about Freaks, the Black Coat's daughter, Oz Perkins. Well,
nice.
No. I'm not going to have Oz Perkins. I would love to have Oz Perkins. But I'm going to go something that's not really represented a whole lot, Brendan. And that's the producer who has worked with Oz Perkins as well as Brian Bertino, who did The Strangers, The Monster, the Dark and the Wicked, which is out now. Adrian Biddle, who I had on the radio program a few years ago as part of my producer program, she's going to be on Talking the Black Coat's Daughter. The woman who is one of the prime forces behind these two amazing modern masters of horror is going to be a part of discussion, Digging into the Darkness, this discussion series. So she's going to be on. And who am I missing? What film am I missing? Freaks, 1BR, Dark Light. What was the other one I'm missing? Wow, my brain is... No, there's had to be one more. There's 5 of them. God, I wish I had in front of me. Nonetheless, Stephen King's 1922.
There you go. Yep.
Zach Hilditch. Zach Hilditch had a chance to direct not only a Netflix film, but a Stephen King adaptation. What would you not want to ask him? What would you not want to talk with him about? And he's got incredible, These Final Hours. If you've never seen the Australian post-apocalyptic film, you need to see it. It is one of the best films. 2013, I want to say it's IFC Midnight. See it, and you'll see an incredibly talented filmmaker, but more importantly, a guy who can cultivate characters. And Zach is one of the nicest guys and filmmakers I've ever met. And he's done so much amazing work, and he's parlayed what one independent film could do into a career that people continue to talk about, even beyond the fact of him adapting the Stephen King story of 1922. And it's so funny, Brandon, because I had a chance to interview him and Thomas Jane and Molly Parker at South by Southwest. And I'll tell you something, one of the greatest interviews I've ever had, because I had a chance to ask Thomas Jane and Molly Parker a question about their characters. And since in 1922, they are a couple that really disintegrates. It rots from the inside, and it's all about murder and paranoia and revenge and stuff. I had the chance to ask them about their divorces personally, their personal lives impacting their characters. And you've never heard more silence in your life when it came to that. But, and this is why I bring this up, they answered the question, and they were very honest about it. And it was a really great answer and a great interview for Horrorhound. When I talked with Zach about a year and a half later for his latest film, he remembered me, and he said that was their most favorite question they had during that whole press run.
That's cool.
It is very cool. So I wanted to have Zach on because not only is he someone who creates really amazing characters and thought-provoking work, but he's also just an incredibly nice guy. And for those, again, montclairfilm.org is the website to register for Digging in the Darkness. For those who join me for the 5 weeks of this discussion series, it's entertaining, it's educational, it's informative, but also it gives the opportunity for these people to have a chance to ask questions in a kind of an open forum. I'll be moderating and I'll have my share of questions, but it's about the people who join and register and pay the fee and want to be a part of this, to talk to these filmmakers whose films have been who are a part of Netflix. Because the great thing about it is we're not going to be sitting there watching the film. You guys are going to watch the film before and then come in prepared with questions. And there are no dumb questions, Brandon. The dumb questions are the ones you don't ask. You know, they're the ones. And we're going to talk filmmaking and horror and personal preferences and about the films and everything in between. with Digging the Darkness, which is what I wanted to do with Montclair Film, create something entertaining and educational for the folks starting February 21st for the 5 Sundays in a row. Again, montclairfilm.org under the Education Center. Register, pay the fee, and join me in mere weeks now before we jump into it. It's going to be a great time with them. And if you follow me on Facebook under JK, you can go ahead and see the listing, and also the Montclair Film Facebook has the whole post up as well. So I appreciate you letting me talk about that and really getting the word out there, because there's so many amazing people that are going to be a part of this. And folks, just like film festivals, just like Brandon, your podcast, just like my podcast, and horror in general, if you don't support things like this and join us, then they aren't going to be around. And I can tell you, it's great to talk over social media with these people who are going to be a part of Digging in Darkness, but to actually be screen to screen and talking with them, and you don't have to spend the travel cost going to a film festival and the ticket price. It's a small fee for the 5 weeks, and it's so worth it. I promise you that it will be an amazing time.
That's awesome. It sounds cool. I got it up on my website as well, so anybody wants to check that out, I have all the information and stuff up on there. Like the info part, I just added that just for you, actually, so now I can put some news and stuff up there.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Well, you know what? It's always good to connect any way you can, because sometimes you gotta jump on the tailcoat. Sometimes you gotta replicate. Sometimes you gotta be there and and mimic what people are doing. And you know what? If it gives you, Brandon, the support you need, and it gets me the support I need, it's mutually beneficial. And folks out there who are interested in this, I know we've got a great number of people already signed up and registered for it, and are looking forward to getting their money's worth. Go out there and do it and try it, because the 5 weeks, it's 1 hour a week, and you get a chance to meet these great people. You get to watch some indie horror that you may have never seen before, and you get to talk to these filmmakers and producers and creators that you won't find anywhere else. It's just going to be amazing, and I'm so passionate about it because it's what I love to do, is talk and moderate, Brandon.
That's awesome. I love the passion from you. Like, it's cool.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, man, you got to have it. You don't have the passion, you're going to get overlooked, because a lot of times that passion is the key to getting people to want to be with you and join you on these things. I mean, I don't mean to bring up the idea of a cult leader, but cult leaders got passion, okay? Jim Jones can get the Kool-Aid for people to drink the Kool-Aid without that charisma and passion, even if it's the wrong thing and insane entirely. But it takes passion and charisma to hook people. And in this case with Digging in Darkness, it is something that is going to be absolutely amazing, and you're going to see that passion come through.
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome. Looking forward to help you spread the word on this. Like I said, like this is great, dude. I love this. It's like what was it, a couple months ago? Shudder did a Shudder Fest, and it was all like over Zoom and stuff like that. And
exactly,
that's crazy. Yeah, so many badasses of horror on there. It's like, holy crap, dude! And it's right here on your damn laptop or regular computer.
Exactly right. And that's that's something now that will be a trend when it comes to film festivals. A lot of film festivals, even if they come back, later on, you're going to go ahead and see the fact that they will go virtual now, whether it's the week after or 2 weeks after, or it'll be completely a virtual component. But that virtual aspect is not going to go anywhere, even if most of the festivals come back to being on-site productions once the vaccine kicks in and we're all safe and we're all following through, wearing the mask and socially distancing and using common sense and washing our hands and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. Like, the future's gonna be totally different, I think, for like the horror conventions and everything that's gonna be changed now. I think it's gonna be good. Like, we can get some actual physical contact once all this is over, plus having like the virtual contact. I think that's gonna be pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is. And I'll tell you something, from a filmmaking perspective, Brandon, having just done a short during COVID time and lucky enough to be able to get it done, I can't tell you how many safety precautions I had to put in place on a small set with a handful. I think I had 5 people total, including cast and crew. And it was from pre-production, actually the initial idea, all the way through the production. It was a matter of people's safety before anything else. And on every level, with cinema, with horror, and everything in between, it is so going to be an entirely changed world and how we do things, no matter whether it's festivals, productions, conventions, and everything in between.
Right. Speaking of that, like the last thing I want to talk to you about is your short film Within the Frame. Like, give me some info on that one, and yeah, I definitely want to check it out and review it if that's possible down the line as well. So,
Absolutely, and it's absolutely, Brandon. You know that that's going to happen. Right now I'm submitting it to festivals, and I'm hoping it's going to be playing festivals starting this spring. I'm waiting to see some of them coming in, and it's really interesting because a lot of people, and don't get me wrong, there's been productions during COVID, but
mhm.
there hasn't been even nearly the amount. And going back to school, and at 43, I decided to go back to school during COVID. And I'll be the first to admit, Brandon, my COVID time has not been as terrible as other people's.
Right,
I've been very blessed and very lucky to help people, to give to charities, to go back to school. To I lost 20 pounds. I got no I got I've been healthy, my family's been safe, and
hmm,
thankfully most people around me have been safe, and God willing, everyone will be as we go through this. And
right,
I'm able to help those who haven't. And the great thing about this with going back to school is I got accepted into the film program for Montclair State University. And it was awesome at 43 to be able to go back there and be around a much younger crowd, because just about everyone there is in their early 20s who are doing this. And I've been very blessed and lucky to be able to go back to school at this time and,
hmm,
have everything around me. And digging in the darkness for me, part of the film one process was coming up with a short film at the end of the semester, which was part virtual, part actually on campus. And a lot of people, when they go into this, are looking to, just come up with an idea or replicate, work that's already been done. I've always dug, because I've been here in Northwest Jersey in Blairstown most of my life. I love the urban legends, and I love the idea of the one called the Polaroid Trail or the Polaroid Field, whatever however it's taken, because there's different
uh,
incarnations of it. But
right,
basically, the crux of it is that there was an urban legend about a couple who came out in Great Meadows to this field, and basically they walked into the field and it was covered with Polaroids. And as they walked through and they picked up Polaroids, they all of a sudden saw all these terrible things. And as they went ahead and finally had enough and they left to get the police, they brought the police back, and all of a sudden the entire field of Polaroids was gone. And
mm,
it's terrifying to think that, first of all, that someone would be doing these terrible things. And, this is from what I understand, it was torture and all these unsettling images and stuff. But all of a sudden for it to be gone. And
right,
with that being said, I didn't want to adapt it directly, even though it would have been cool to do that. But I wanted to do somewhat of a version of it that was based off of it. And so within the frame, and Brandon, actually, you're the first person I'm actually talking about this ever,
oh wow,
on any sort of thing. So I'm very happy that I'm able to do that with you and give you at least a little background in it. Because once it gets out there, I have a feeling people are going to be really surprised by it. But
yeah,
when you go ahead, when I went ahead and went into my first semester back in the film program, I wanted to base it off of, and the story became more about, a character who would give into their impulses and go ahead and follow what these Polaroids were, and until the point that they realized that it was too late to turn back. How that needing to live vicariously through and being a voyeur and giving into that fear would happen. And Sarah Scoofs, who is a talented actress who's starred in so many features and shorts, she
hmm,
takes on the main character in Within the Frame, and it's all about the fact of Polaroids and all these terrible things that happen on this property that we see in normal traditional Polaroids, and also on the more the Fujifilm minis. And it's a lot of unsettling imagery. It's not anything that's inappropriate to the point you can't watch, but
right,
it takes you on a journey of two stories: one of what this family has done in this house and on this property, and also this woman's journey, who is just trying to get away from her family for a morning and is out for a walk and ends up, creating something where horror does happen. And
hmm,
it's visual, and there's one line of dialogue. The sound design I'm so proud of in the score, because I was able to work with a really talented composer who worked on brass and quartz bowls. She's
hmm,
Ecuadorian. Her name is Susan Decker. And I was able to work with a very talented DP named Emily, who was in my film class, and I had really great PAs on it, and Sarah, who was the lead actress. And it really was a student COVID production that
Hmm.
will, in the 5.5 minutes, Brandon, hopefully will creep you out, will terrify you, and will make you, will linger with you, because it addresses the idea of what we don't know behind the doors and walls of our neighbors, of people around us, how they wear those masks, and what's really underneath there, and how these terrible things could really happen, even if they're just in Polaroids. Because for anyone who has seen Polaroids, there's a tangible quality about them. There's
Hmm.
a memory about them, but there's also something very unsettling about them. And it's so funny because when you see the short film, one of the things being a student short is I didn't have a whole lot of money in the budget. I know you've probably heard that 1,000 times for a
Hmm.
thousand filmmakers. There's not enough money in the budget. There never is.
Right.
But I was lucky enough to take my own childhood photos and either turn them into Polaroids through an app I have on the phone, or to actually get authentic Polaroids or shoot our Polaroids of the family on the Fujifilm minis. And I'll
Hmm.
tell you something, Brandon, I know a lot of people sit there and go, I don't remember my childhood. Well, I obviously don't, because the pictures I have that my aunt gave me, and my aunt Linda, who I shot this on her property and in her house, she gave me a box of old photos. And I'll tell you something, there is ones of me with the Easter Bunny as a baby, and there's a robot in one with the Christmas time, and there's one of me flying a kite that looks like a Cthulhu. I mean, there is some really fucked up shit that I was around that I have no recollection of, but
Hmm.
they made for great Polaroids that really set the mood and the stage for what you're going to go through with the short of Within the Frame.
Well, that sounds awesome. What right up my alley too. Sounds creepy as shit. And
Yeah, it
yeah.
is, and it's influenced by Spectrovision. It
Hmm.
really is. Mandy and Color Out of Space. There's little things about the visual and the sound that really linger with me, and it's also Jack Ketchum, and it's the found footage POV style, and it's not a
Hmm.
found footage by any stretch of the imagination, but the POV is a blend of color and black and white. So it's going to be really interesting to see, and then it's a build to a really kind of far out trippy final 45 seconds once we see what really is within the frame.
Right. That sounds great. Yeah, that's totally up my alley. I love the stuff, like I said before, that really just takes you away, and it's not the norm.
Yeah, it's not. And I wanted something that had an originality. And again, for people out there, you want to create something, focused on the sound, focus on the score, because you can make the greatest visuals in the entire world, have the best performances. And Sarah is incredible in this. She is incredible in it, and what the emotion she's able to do, and what she's ever able to emulate with her performance. And we only shot with her for one day. So what we had to get everything in, and she acts behind the mask through 90% of it because of it's a COVID production, and she's able to do stuff that's amazing. But if it wasn't for the sound and score, which I'm so proud of, I had such a great time editing and doing this, it wouldn't be the short that it is. And when people see it, when it goes out for reviews, which it will, hopefully sometime this year, you will be blown away by it, because that's what people say to me. That's not my words. That's other people who have seen it, and people who have enjoyed it already, as part of the process to get it to where I want it to be.
Right. I'm really looking forward to that. That's gonna be
Thank
awesome.
you.
Of
I
course, I
appreciate
help you spread the word on that one. Of
Thank you so
course.
much. It means a lot to me, and it was a labor of love. So it's great to have people appreciate it and look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, definitely something to look forward to in the plague years that we're in now.
Well, it's very true, and it's great not to see something that's about infection, about plague, but it
Right.
it definitely was shaped by the aspect of COVID. And it's so funny now, Brandon, because the last couple of years we've seen a lot of politically fueled horror storytelling, and
Hmm.
with Trump being formerly now the president of the United States, and now with COVID, you're going to see COVID inflect or infuse and reflect our storytelling, our productions, how we are able to do things in the future. And it really is going to be interesting, because one of the things that I make at a point at the beginning is, and this ties back again to what we talked about with Color Out of Space, my opening quote is a Lovecraft quote. And
Hmm.
it's something that, we talk about invasions into our world, and the impact of what Lovecraft quoted, and the Cthulhu and all the lore behind it. And it
Mhm.
really is, the COVID is that kind of thing that has invaded our world and got out. And it's something that affects everything and everyone, including film production, cinema, horror, and more.
Exactly. And Richard Stanley kind of prophesized this to me when we were talking that one time or whatever. It might have been on the message. I can't remember, but he told me that the old ones are coming. This was sometime
Yep.
like last year that they're going to rise from the water. I'm like, all right, yeah, his predictions are coming true for the most part. You know, the old ones
He
are kind
really
of the
is a
virus. You
beast,
know what I
isn't
mean?
he?
Like, makes sense. Like getting a little scary though.
Yeah,
You know,
it is getting a little scary. But you know what, though? For those who watched The Stand, Mick Garris's miniseries, you saw this
uh,
coming. One of them finally got out, Brandon. I mean, if we knew how many times I'm sure these things almost happened, we might
mhm.
never leave our houses. But one finally got out, no matter what you want to believe. It got out and it affected us in a way we weren't prepared for. So,
Right. Yeah, growing up watching the stand, you know, it kind of got me ready for this stuff. I think it was really going to happen, you know, but I'll be
yeah.
damned. You
Yeah,
know,
it really is. And that's one other thing I would say. Folks, you want a great film education? And I only reason why I bring this up is because I listened to Danny Boyle's commentary on 28 Days Later. For
hmm
him to have hours, and even less than that, I'm sure at the time, to shoot that empty scene of London where Cillian Murphy is walking through and
hmm
he sees it so empty. I mean, thank God we never got to a world like that. But film commentaries are a great teaching tool on how to do things like that and create fantasy that reflects what might be reality. You never
right.
know. You never know. So,
You see, art imitates life, and
yes.
life also imitates art. So, you know,
Yeah, it does, dude. You're
yeah.
absolutely right, and it's something that folks should look at. And a lot of times they say write what you know or write what inspires you, and I did that with Within a Frame. And a lot of stuff I do with Horrorhound and Horror Happens Radio and all that stuff is stuff that inspires me. But
Mhm.
get out there and ask the questions, get to know the filmmakers and programmers and PR, and ask questions that filmmakers want to know. Don't ask fan questions. If you're a journalist, don't ask fan questions. Ask questions about the process, because I'll tell you what, you ask questions about sound, you'll become a filmmaker's best friend, guaranteed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, this has been an awesome talk and like
Thank you.
a lot of
Yes,
valuable information, man. This has been really cool.
yeah, dude, it's been a blast to talk with you, Brandon. Great questions, a lot of great conversation here, and thank you for allowing me to talk about stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I haven't talked about in a long time, and stuff that I haven't covered anywhere else. So, dude, I'm happy it's with you. I'm happy that people get a preview of some of the stuff. And again, digging into the darkness, guys and dolls, it's going to be one of the great joys of me as a professional. And moncorefilm.org coming up in mere weeks, for 5 Sundays in a row, and films like Stephen King's 1922, 1BR, Darklight, The Black Coat's Daughter, and there's another film somewhere in there. But nonetheless, it's going to be great talking with these masters, producers, directors, and more, as part of this through Montclair Film. And I hope you join. Register. It's only $75 for 5 sessions. That's $15 for each session, but you can buy it only together. And you know what? That's cheaper than going to a film festival, and you'll get as much content, if not more. You'll actually get to ask a question, which you can't do at all film festivals. So join us, and register now at montclairfilm.org. And Brandon, thank you so much, and I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Jay, and you have a good rest of your night, and I will help spread the word for you.
My friend, thank you. Keep up the great work and spreading the word itself. And thank you, everyone out there, for listening. And as always, pleasant nightmares.
Take it easy, Jay.
Thank you.